On what seemed like a routine flight, a mischievous boy in C-12 turned a flight attendant's day upside down. What began as playful antics soon escalated into a mysterious and urgent situation, putting everyone on edge and under fear. What was really happening, and how would she handle it? Stay tuned to find out. Also, let us know where you're listening from. Emily Turner, a dedicated flight attendant, adored her role. Her passion for meeting new individuals and exploring different destinations was the primary reason she chose this career. The thrill of flying always remained exciting for her. On this specific flight, she was performing her routine duties, ensuring every passenger was at ease and had all they required. However, she couldn't have anticipated the events that would unfold on this flight. At 35 years old, Emily had encountered a variety of passengers throughout her tenure as a flight attendant. But the young boy in C-12 stood out. He appeared to be no older than 6, with tousled brown hair and lively, mischievous eyes. Emily had managed her share of unruly children on flights before, but this little boy was different. The boy exhibited typical childlike behavior, feeling anxious about flying. He was creating unusual gestures with his hands, which made Emily chuckle as she walked down the aisle. She observed him making amusing signs, laughing quietly at his playful actions while catching his gaze. In response, he smiled back and began imitating animal sounds. Emily found herself laughing more often, as the boy's joyful energy lifted her spirits. Meanwhile, the boy's father was deeply focused on his laptop, typing away intensely and seemingly oblivious to his son's playful behavior. Emily found this peculiar, but chose not to think much of it. She continued her service, occasionally looking back at Ethan, who kept engaging her with more signs and sounds as she moved along the aisle. The boy caught her attention again, making exaggerated facial expressions by puffing out his cheeks and crossing his eyes. Suppressing a laugh, Emily glanced at the father, who remained absorbed in his laptop. "Can I assist you with anything?" Emily inquired of the father, but he dismissed her without looking up. Encouraged by his father's distraction, the boy persisted with his antics. He began producing odd chirping and whistling sounds that made Emily smile despite herself. "Hey there! What's your name?" she asked the boy, kneeling to his level. "Ethan," he replied proudly, his face lighting up with a broad grin. "Well, Ethan, you're quite the entertainer," Emily remarked, shaking her head with amusement. "But you need to keep it down, okay? People are trying to rest," Emily added. Ethan nodded seriously, though Emily doubted he would remain quiet for long. She proceeded with her duties, checking on other passengers and serving drinks, but every time she looked back, Ethan was still performing faces and signs, much to the annoyance of a few nearby travelers. Emily attempted to concentrate on her work, but Ethan's behavior was increasingly hard to ignore. While serving an elderly couple, Emily heard giggles coming from Ethan's direction. She turned to see him sticking out his tongue and wiggling his fingers near his ears. Growing tired of his behavior, Emily said, "Ethan, honey, please sit still." "I'm bored," Ethan whined, gazing up at her with wide eyes. "Maybe you can draw something," Emily suggested, hoping to divert his attention. "I don't have anything to draw with," Ethan replied, dramatically shrugging. Emily rummaged through her bag and found a pen and a napkin, handing them to him. "Here, draw me something nice." "Okay," Ethan accepted eagerly and began to draw. Emily continued her rounds but soon heard a sharp whistle. Turning around, she saw Ethan holding up his napkin covered in doodles and making more noises. "Look what I made," he called out, waving the napkin. "That's great, Ethan," Emily responded, attempting to maintain a cheerful tone. "But you need to keep it down, okay?" "Okay," Ethan nodded, though his attention quickly shifted as he got back to making whooping sounds and pretending to be an airplane. Ethan then stood on his knees, peering over the seat back and making faces at passengers behind him. Emily observed as an older woman chuckled and waved back, but after doing this several times, she grew annoyed. "Ethan, please sit down," Emily said more firmly, still puzzled by the boy's irritability. Ethan pouted and complied, only to resume bouncing in his seat moments later. Emily's patience was wearing thin. Fearing it reflected poorly on her, she couldn't manage her passengers. She glanced at Ethan's father, still engrossed in his laptop and unaware of his son's behavior. "Excuse me, sir." Emily approached him again. "Could you please ask your son to sit quietly?" But the indifferent father seemed unlikely to comply. He looked up, blinking as if noticing her for the first time. He glanced between Ethan and Emily. "Sure," he said, turning to his son. "Ethan, buddy, sit down." "Okay," Ethan responded, but added, "But Dad, I'm bored." continuing to press buttons on his father's laptop and even lifting it into the air. "Just read something or play with your toys," Emily suggested. The father mumbled something and returned to his laptop, paying little attention as Emily walked past. Ethan began making exaggerated hand signs, sticking his tongue out and crossing his eyes again. Emily chuckled and gave him a playful wink. "You're a little comedian, aren't you?" she said, gently ruffling his hair. His father remained focused on his laptop, barely acknowledging her. "Ethan, keep it down," Emily reminded him. The father mumbled absent-mindedly, and it was clear Ethan had no intention of stopping anytime soon. Emily continued with her pre-flight responsibilities, but Ethan's behavior was increasingly difficult to overlook. He was the most irritable child she'd ever encountered. Each time she glanced his way, he was performing a new trick with his hands, causing other passengers to look at him with exasperation. As the airplane began to taxi, Emily noticed Ethan still hadn't fastened his seatbelt. Time was running out. Emily sighed inwardly, realizing she was handling this situation alone. She gave Ethan a stern look. "Ethan, you need to sit down and be quiet. Can you do that for me?" Ethan nodded, but shortly after resumed his antics, making whooping sounds and imitating an airplane. Taking a deep breath, Emily returned to her station, needing a moment to regain her composure. As the flight prepared for departure, she stood there taking deep breaths, still hearing Ethan's noises. She glanced over to see him standing on his seat, flapping his arms. Frustration overcame her patience, and she finally snapped. "Ethan, sit down right now," she said sharply, startling him. Ethan's eyes widened, and he quickly sat down in his seat, finally quiet. Emily took another deep breath to calm herself and looked at his father, who had finally noticed the disturbance and appeared puzzled. "Is everything okay?" he asked. Emily forced a smile. "Just fine, sir, just fine." She turned and walked away, muttering under her breath, "Just wish Ethan would sit down for more than 5 seconds," as she continued her duties. Emily couldn't help but glance back at Ethan, now sulking in his seat, hoping the rest of the flight would pass uneventfully. However, she sensed that with Ethan on board, anything could happen, signaling she was in for a challenging flight. Emily frowned, her patience dwindling. She leaned closer to Ethan. "Come on, Ethan. It's really important." But Ethan continued making signs with his hands, his small fingers moving rapidly in the air. Emily crouched down to his level, noticing a hint of redness on his hands, which made her more concerned. "Hi there," she said softly. "Can you show me your hands, sweetie?" Ethan extended his hands towards her, displaying both palms. He thought it was part of the game, but Emily saw that his hands were indeed red, and noticed he was frequently scratching them. Her initial amusement shifted to concern, sensing that something was troubling the child. Determined to uncover what was wrong, Emily held Ethan's hands gently, examining them closely. She could distinguish between a rash and scratch marks. "Sir," she called again with more urgency, "I think there's something wrong with your son's hands." She held them up for the father to see. The father finally looked up, noticing the condition of Ethan's hands. His face turned pale. "Ethan, what's wrong?" Emily observed that Ethan's hands were moving more erratically and appeared red from scratching. The father attempted to grab his son's arms, but Ethan resisted. Emily's heart raced, realizing this wasn't mere stubbornness. Something serious was happening. She also noticed that the father seemed unable to control his son. "Sir, can I speak to you for a moment?" Emily addressed the father. The man sighed and closed his laptop. "Yes, what is it?" he asked, pretending that Ethan was simply an agitated child afraid of flying. "Your son needs to put his seatbelt on, and I'm concerned about his hands. They look irritated," Emily explained, pointing out that the plane was ready to depart. "The plane will be airborne in a few minutes, and your son refuses to buckle his seatbelt. This is becoming unmanageable." The father looked at Ethan's hands, his brow furrowing in concern. "Ethan, what's going on?" he asked, trying to restrain his son. Ethan continued pressing buttons on the laptop and picking it up, but only listened briefly before Emily moved past him. Emily felt a knot of worry tighten in her stomach. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel and click that notification bell to get inspired by these real-life stories every day. Now back to the story. "Is there something wrong with his hands? Has he been scratching them a lot?" Emily inquired. The father shook his head. "I don't know. He's been acting strange all day." Emily took a deep breath. "Sir, I think we need to take a closer look. This could be an allergic reaction or something more serious." Ethan didn't respond verbally but continued making the odd signs with his hands. Has he been in contact with anything unusual recently? She asked, trying to remain calm while suspecting the father might know more than he was revealing. The father shook his head again. No, not that I know of. He was fine this morning. The plane began to taxi toward the runway, and Emily needed to secure Ethan and strap him in. More importantly, she had to determine the cause of his reaction. Sir, we need to get him seated for takeoff. Once we're airborne, I'll retrieve the medical kit, and we can take a closer look, she explained, unsure of what she would discover. With the plane about to take off, Emily knew swift action was necessary. She signaled to a fellow flight attendant. Can you get the first aid kit and possibly inform the captain that we might require medical assistance? Ethan's father looked alarmed. Do you think it's that serious? I don't know, but it's better to be safe, Emily replied calmly. The other flight attendant brought the first aid kit, and Emily knelt beside Ethan. Ethan, can you show me your hands? Initially scared, Ethan tried to hide under the seat, but his father coaxed him out. Eventually, Ethan cooperated, extending his hands to reveal red and swollen skin with small scratches. Emily felt a surge of concern. Okay, sweetie, we're going to help you, she said gently. She opened the first aid kit, pulling out antiseptic wipes and bandages, unsure if they would suffice. Emily continued questioning the father. Sir, do you know if Ethan has any allergies? Not that I'm aware of, he replied, looking increasingly worried. Emily carefully cleaned Ethan's hands, trying to comfort him. You're doing great, Ethan. Just a little longer, okay? Ethan whimpered but didn't resist. Emily swiftly bandaged the worst scratches, still uncertain about what would happen next. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a slight delay and will be taking off shortly. Please remain seated, and we will update you soon. Emily felt the responsibility weigh heavily on her. She glanced at Ethan's father, who was now fully attentive. I think we need to get him checked out as soon as we land, Emily stated. The father nodded, saying, Thank you for noticing. I didn't realize. It's okay, we'll take care of him, Emily reassured him. Reluctantly, the father managed to get Ethan to sit down and fasten his seatbelt, though the boy remained visibly uncomfortable, his hands still moving in those strange, agitated patterns as the plane prepared for takeoff. The boy was still showing signs of discomfort, and Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. She stayed by his side, ready to act if his condition worsened. As the engines roared and the plane began to ascend, Emily noticed Ethan still standing and refusing to sit down or buckle his seatbelt. Maintaining her friendly demeanor, Emily approached him. All right, Ethan, it's time to sit down and put your seatbelt on. Ethan pouted and shook his head. No, I don't want to. Emily sighed, her patience slightly tested. Come on, Ethan, it's for your safety. He continued to resist, which made Emily feel a flicker of frustration. But then she noticed something alarming. Ethan's neck and face were red and appeared itchy, with tiny bumps all over them. It was more than just a rash. Ethan, are your hands hurting? She asked, concerned, trying to keep her voice gentle. He hadn't mentioned anything about his face or hands until now. Suddenly, Emily saw Ethan's arms becoming redder as he scratched them vigorously. She crouched down for a closer inspection. Ethan, does your hand hurt? She asked softly. It's itchy, Ethan replied, his voice small and uncertain. He began scratching the bandages off his arms in irritation. Alarm bells rang in Emily's mind. She turned to the father. Excuse me, sir, your son's face is very red. Has he been scratching a lot? The father finally looked up, his eyes filled with concern as he examined Ethan's hands. It looks like he has a rash, he muttered. Emily felt a surge of adrenaline. I think we need to check this out. We can't ignore a rash like this, especially on a flight. She quickly contacted the captain, explaining the situation. Ethan nodded, his playful demeanor now replaced by visible discomfort. Emily turned to the father, gently tapping his shoulder. Excuse me, sir. I believe your son has a serious rash on his hands, David. The father's face paled upon seeing Ethan's hands. Oh my God, it looks bad. It wasn't like this earlier. Emily's heart raced. We need to check this out. It could be something serious. Though stressed, she had to manage the situation effectively. She promptly informed the captain and the head flight attendant, and they decided to halt the plane before takeoff. Passengers were notified and the cabin buzzed with murmurs of concern and curiosity. What's happening? A passenger inquired. There's a medical situation, Emily responded, striving to keep her voice steady. We're taking precautions. Internally, she felt she was losing control. The captain, understanding the severity, announced over the intercom, "We can't risk it. Everyone, please remain seated while we address a medical concern," he continued. Passengers began to talk among themselves, a low hum of anxiety and curiosity filling the air. Some pointed at the little boy. Emily felt everyone's eyes on her as she led Ethan and his father off the plane, with all passengers staring as they walked down the aisle. Ethan and David were escorted off the aircraft. Tension thick in the atmosphere. Emily could see the fear in David's eyes. "I don't know what happened," he said, his voice shaky. "He was fine this morning." Emily remained with them, attempting to keep both calm. "It might just be an allergic reaction, but we need to ensure you reach a medical facility immediately." Ethan looked up at Emily, eyes wide with fear. "Am I going to be okay?" He didn't understand why they had to leave the plane. Emily knelt and took his small red hand in hers. "We are going to make sure you get the help you need, Ethan." As they entered the terminal, a medical team was already present. "We need to examine the boy," a doctor stated seriously. The medical team quickly assessed Ethan's condition, while Emily watched anxiously, her heart pounding. She stood by as Ethan's hands were carefully inspected, worried about the possibility of it being contagious and the risks to the entire plane. The doctor looked up with an unreadable expression. "We need to run some tests. It could be an allergic reaction, but we can't be certain without further examination." David looked pale, his eyes wide with fear. "A virus? Are you saying he could have a virus?" he asked, unsure how to handle the situation. "We have to be cautious," the doctor replied. "But we'll know more soon." David nodded, visibly relieved yet still worried. "Thank you," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. Emily took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had to leave the little boy in the safe care of the medical team. Her part was done, but the other passengers remained on the plane, likely growing more anxious by the minute. She needed to keep them calm as part of her duty. As the ambulance drove away, Emily returned to the plane, her mind racing with thoughts about little Ethan. She informed the passengers that the situation was under control and that they would be taking off shortly, though her thoughts remained on Ethan's return to the aircraft. Emily explained the situation as best as she could. "We've taken the boy and his father off for medical evaluation. We need to be patient while we wait for more information." A wave of concern swept through the cabin. "What if it's something serious?" a woman in the back called out. "We're taking all necessary precautions," Emily assured them. "Please remain seated and calm. We'll keep you updated." The plane was inspected and found to have no immediate risks, allowing it to be cleared for takeoff again, this time with 2 fewer passengers. Minutes felt like hours as they waited. Emily couldn't help but replay the events in her mind, questioning whether she had handled everything correctly. What if I missed something? What if I could have prevented the boy from getting so bad? She thought, realizing she was just being hard on herself. Finally, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've received word from the medical team. The boy is being treated for an allergic reaction. He does not have a virus." A collective sigh of relief filled the cabin. Emily felt the tension release from her shoulders, knowing she had done her job and ensured everyone's safety. As the plane prepared for takeoff once more, Emily checked on the passengers, her smile returning. The ordeal was over, serving as a reminder of the unpredictable nature of her job. Each day brought new challenges, and it was her duty to face them with calm and courage. What do you think about Emily's actions? Did she handle the situation as best as she could, or is there something you might have done differently in her place? Share your thoughts and let us know how you would react if faced with such an unexpected turn of events at 30,000 feet.